So have you ever felt just spiritually drained? Like you're going through the motions, but that connection, that joy, it's just not there? Well, that feeling is what our source material calls spiritual dryness. And today, we're going to dig into the 7 potential roots of this feeling. We'll break them down one by one to really get a handle on what causes it and maybe how to find our way back.
And this right here, this is the powerful metaphor that frames this whole conversation. Just picture it, a branch that was once part of this life-giving vine, now just cut off, thrown away, and withering. Man, that is a stark picture of disconnection, right? It really sets the stage for everything we're about to talk about.
And I'm willing to bet a lot of us can relate to this, at least on some level. That feeling of distance, like your spiritual life is just losing its color. Look, it's a really common human experience, and figuring out where it comes from, well, that's the first step to getting back on track.
Okay, so what are we really talking about here? Let's get a clear definition. The sources are pretty clear that spiritual dryness is way more than just a bad day. It's this longer state, where spiritual practices feel empty, and that sense of a divine presence, it feels faint or maybe even gone completely.
All right, so the first root we're going to tackle is probably the most straightforward one, simply losing the connection. This is all about what happens when we either physically or mentally just step away from our source of spiritual nourishment.
Yeah, let's go back to that branch metaphor for a second. It's simple, right? A branch can't thrive if it's not attached to the vine. And the sources say it's pretty much the same for us. If you're only showing up to fellowship every now and then, or even if you're there in person but your mind is a million miles away, you're basically starving your spirit of what it needs to live.
And you can really see the contrast between these two states, can't you? On one hand, you've got this constant nourishment, a real sense of belonging. But on the other, it's just isolation. And what's interesting is the idea that sometimes people leave because they never felt like they truly belonged in the first place, and it becomes this sad, self-fulfilling prophecy of withering away.
And this just illustrates the solution so perfectly. The imagery is so powerful, isn't it? A tree planted right by streams of water, a constant, life-giving source. The source material basically says this water is the Word. So staying plugged in, consistently engaged, that's the key to preventing that spiritual drought.
Okay, so we've talked about external stuff. Now let's shift gears and look inward, to the conditions of the heart. The next few roots are all about what we could call the sickness within, those things that can cause us to dry up from the inside out.
So our second root is what's called personal affliction. The source material points to this incredible story where a man's physical problem is actually a metaphor for a spiritual one. He has a withered hand, and it represents a part of him that's just lost its life, its vitality. It suggests that spiritual dryness can sometimes be a symptom of a much deeper, personal struggle or wound.
And wow, this verse from the Psalms, it just captures that internal feeling perfectly. You can feel the anguish, right? My heart is afflicted and withered like grass. The pain is so deep, it even makes him forget to eat. This is a dryness that comes from a place of deep personal suffering. Now, the third root is a totally different kind of internal sickness, pride. The source gives us this image of a tall, lush, green tree. I mean, it looks fantastic, right? Healthy, strong, but that self-perception, that feeling of being so strong and green on your own, that can be a trap, a kind of spiritual arrogance.
And here comes the warning. This verse sets up this incredibly dramatic reversal. It says the very thing that's a source of pride, being that tall tree, is exactly what makes it a target. So the point is crystal clear. Exalting yourself, well, that's just inviting a fall.
And here it is, the rest of the thought. It's a complete flip of what you'd expect. God opposes the proud, drying up that green tree, but lifts up the humble, making the withered tree flourish. What a stark reminder, huh? That true spiritual life is found in humility, none in thinking you've got it all figured out.
Okay, our fourth root is a really powerful one. And honestly, it can be a little unsettling. It's anger and uprooting. This is where the source material gets into divine consequences as a reason for spiritual withering.
And the language used here, it's straight out of Ezekiel, and it is intense, uprooted in fury. I mean, that describes a complete and violent separation from the source of life. This isn't some slow fade into dryness. It's a sudden, decisive action that's described as a response to rebellion.
Which brings us to our fifth root, human anger and just totally misplaced priorities.
And the story of Jonah is such a fascinating case study for this. See, Jonah's anger isn't just about a plant getting destroyed. It's about his sense of justice clashing with God's mercy. His own spiritual state is so withered that he literally values his own comfort, a plant for shade, more than the lives of an entire city. It just shows you how twisted our priorities can get.
All right, we're moving into our final area now, which covers the last two roots. This one brings the focus right into the community, into the conflict in the vineyard. So, what happens when the branches start fighting with each other?
This is such a crucial idea in the source material. It's the simple fact that the health of one person is deeply tied to the health of the whole community. When you have internal strife, things like jealousy, rebellion, hatred, it acts like a disease spreading through the vineyard, causing individual branches to get sick and wither.
So the sixth root is rebellion within the community. And the story of Korah is the perfect, if terrifying, example. This guy Korah, he challenges the established leadership, and it creates this massive split. And the consequence described in the text, it's swift and it's absolute. A complete severing from the community and from life itself.
And that brings us to another form of this internal conflict, raw jealousy. It all starts with this simple song of praise for the young hero, David. But for King Saul, these words become the spark that ignites this massive fire of resentment in his heart.
And that brings us to our seventh and final root, jealousy. For Saul, the result was just catastrophic. His jealousy, according to the text, opened the door to an evil spirit. And from that point on, his spiritual life completely unraveled. He became the perfect picture of a withered soul, just consumed by paranoia and hate.
So, we've gone through all 7 of these roots of dryness, from disconnection and pride to anger and conflict within the community. And after all that, the source material leaves us with this one critical question. Can dry bones live? Is there any hope left for something that is completely withered away?
And the answer given here is just amazing. You've got this valley of bones, so dry they represent absolute death. And the solution is breathtakingly simple. Hear the word of the Lord. The very same word that gives life to the healthy tree is powerful enough to bring life back to what is completely dead. It's presented as the ultimate antidote to every kind of spiritual dryness.
And so, we're going to end with this question for you to think about. After seeing how things like disconnection, pride, and internal conflict can cause us to wither, it really forces us to ask, how much of our own spiritual vitality depends on the health and the unity of the community we're a part of? It's a thought that really ties everything we've just explored together. Thanks for joining me.